Well, hello, everyone. I'm excited to get started today. Today, we are talking about marketing and the death of the third-party cookie, surviving and thriving in a post-privacy world. A little bit of housekeeping to get out of the way. If you do have questions as we're presenting here, please do toss them in the chat while you remember them, because we will, if we don't cover them live, we'll definitely cover them at the end, and questions are definitely appreciated. A copy of these slides will be emailed to you, so you don't need to worry about taking screen captures. We will make sure to get them to you. If you are joining us from the live stream, there will be a QR code at the end where you can request a copy of those slides. A little bit about me. My name is Steve Robinson. I'm the founder and CEO here at Brilliant Metrics. In addition to leading the team here, I'm also a public speaker. I teach with UWM School of Continuing Ed. And I'm married with 3 beautiful children who have a tendency to interrupt me. So if they do pop in and make an unannounced appearance, just roll with it. A little bit about Brilliant Metrics. We are a B2B digital first marketing agency. What makes us different is that our clients come to us when they want to not only execute, marketing, but also get to that next level in the marketing that they're running, move up what we call the marketing maturity model to that next level and continuously improve. And I think that's what sets us apart. At least that's what our clients tell us. Today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about how cookies work. We're actually going to get a little geeky about how cookies work. So you're going to come out of here knowing a lot more about cookies than you did coming in. But more specifically, we're going to talk about the implications of how cookies no longer work and what that means for paid media and our ability to target that paid media, and what it means for measuring the efficacy of our marketing overall. So when we talk about cookies, we're not talking about those yummy, tasty, crispy things that come out of the oven. We're talking about literally a small bit of text. But it's a small bit of text that a website can store in your browser's memory and then retrieve at a later date or time. Sometimes that later date or time is the next page that you click to. Sometimes that later date and time could be weeks or even months later. But all it is it's a small bit of text, which in and of itself is actually harmless. So you hear people talking about cookies as if they are these bad things, when in reality, they are a very important part of how the internet works. It's what allows a website to remember who you are from page to page, so you don't have to log in to see every single page of a website that you have to log into. Within cookies, there are actually 2 different kinds. So first-party cookies, an example of this would be if I am on NewYorkTimes.com, and again, I log in, so I get access to all of their news articles, right? It's a cookie that allows NewYorkTimes.com or NYT.com to remember who I am from page to page and not force me to log in every single time. That cookie contains a unique user identifier that they can look up to see if I paid my subscription. And that user identifier can only be read by NewYorkTimes.com servers. No other server on the internet can go and find out what my user ID is on NYT.com. Only NYT can read that cookie. And that's true of all cookies. Cookies can only be read by the entity setting the cookie. A third-party cookie, on the other hand, would be if I'm on NewYorkTimes.com and a script that is loaded, we're saying jokingly here, evil-ads.co, right? Runs a script that New York Times embedded on their website. So New York Times sees evil-ads.co as a partner. So they run this script on the New York Times website, which then that script runs in my browser as I'm browsing the news articles. That script will set a cookie that only evil-ads.co can read. But that cookie includes a unique identifier, and it allows the evil-ads.co script to phone home back to evil-ads.co and say exactly what I have been reading on NewYorkTimes.com. Only evil-ads.co servers can read this cookie, but because the script that's reading and writing the cookie is running on NewYorkTimes.com, now evil-ads.co knows what I'm reading and what I'm doing on NewYorkTimes.com. Every single article I'm reading there. And anywhere else evil-ads.co has a partnership, they can see what I'm doing on those websites too. So third-party cookies are set and read by a third party to the company or the website that you're on at the time. And that's the type of cookie that has people up in arms. And it's not so much that it's just a cookie, but what has people as angry as this guy is the fact that these unique identifiers are set on our browsers. And then as we're going around the internet, every single website that partners with any data broker or any advertising company can then track us from website to website to website to see what it is we're reading and what we're doing. And privacy advocates say that that's not okay because as consumers, we're not giving permission for that tracking from website to website. We have a relationship with the company whose website we're on. We don't have a relationship with evil-ads.co. And that's where the problem lies. So what does this look like? Well, let's just say that I am into motorcycles, right? So I am on a publication where I am reading about the latest Harley-Davidson electric live wire bike, right? And I'm really into this article. The third-party data company sets a cookie on my browser, and they've never seen me before. So they assign a new identifier in that cookie. It's just a long string of letters and numbers that is unique to me that are sitting in that cookie. And they report back to their servers that that cookie, that identifier was reading an article about motorcycles. So then I click a link and I move over to a different publication to read more about, Harley Davidson. And third-party data company also has a partnership with that company. And so it sends a note back to the third-party data company that same identifier was spotted again, this time on this website, reading another article about motorcycles. So then I follow another link and go to a third publication that also has a relationship with this data provider. And again, they send that phone home back saying that I'm looking at yet another article about newspapers. So then I come over and I'm just reading an article on slate.com. It has nothing to do with motorcycles. And what do I see? I see a motorcycle ad because somebody paid to target individuals interested in motorcycles. And since this third-party data provider had a partnership either with each of these three publications, or even more sneakily, potentially, they have a relationship with the advertising partner of any of these three publications. They know that they don't know who I am. They don't know I'm Steve Robinson, but they know that I have a unique identifier on my computer that says that I'm really into motorcycles. And they're able to then tell the demand side provider that's bidding on these requests that, yeah, we don't know who this guy is, but he's really into motorcycles. So if you're going after that audience, you should definitely buy this ad. That's basically how third-party cookies worked in the case of some browsers to track people across the internet, but then us as marketers give us the ability to target very niche, very specific audiences based on their browsing history. What happened? Well, somebody saw an opportunity. If you think about it, Android and Chrome are owned by Google. They have no interest in changing the status quo and how things work. Microsoft has a significant ads business as well. They are very hesitant about changing the status quo. But Apple doesn't sell advertising. They have no skin in this game, and they had an opportunity to make one of their core values privacy and really have a unique selling position in the marketplace by becoming a digital privacy advocate for their users. And so consumers are thanking Apple for finally plugging the hole in this, as their browsers do not accept these third-party cookies. We as marketers, we're kind of cursing Apple because it started a whole big mess in both the measurement and the attribution side of things, as well as in our ability to target paid media. So how did this go down? Well, you can think about it as sort of a back and forth between Apple and the industry. Apple says you no longer have third-party cookies. The industry's like, okay, that kind of sucks, but we're pretty smart. We'll just figure out how to use first-party cookies to act like third-party cookies. Because if we store enough first-party cookies, if we partner with New York Times to store the cookie, then we don't need to store the cookie. They can store the cookie and we can just sync up the data later. And Apple's like, okay, then your first-party cookies only last 7 days. Industry's like, okay, well, 7 days is enough to still retarget, and we can always refresh that cookie. So this is okay. This is okay. And Apple's like, make that 1 day. And now we're into some issues here. The industry cannot effectively use these cookies to target media on Safari anymore because they don't last long enough in the case of first-party cookies, and they can't be set or read at all in the case of third-party cookies. But the key takeaway here is that it doesn't really matter if it's first or third party. When we talk about third-party cookies and the death of the cookie, we're talking about any tracking cookies overall. So how is this a threat? Safari is only 31% of browsers. And so in early 2020, they started really locking this down. But it wasn't just Safari. Mozilla and then Microsoft jumped over to not the dark side, I guess the light side or the dark side, depending on which side of this battle you're on, and started blocking cookies as well in late 2020. And so now, as early as 3 years ago, we weren't able to target effectively individuals, or at least individuals' browsers using cookies, or at least cookies alone, on half of those users. Chrome and Google have been dragging their feet. They've announced the end of third-party cookies in Chrome 2 or 3 times now, but they swear they're going to stick to it, and that mid-2024, Q3 2024, they are for certain pulling the plug on third-party cookies. The reason why they've dragged their feet is they have a number of initiatives collectively called the Privacy Sandbox that help replace these third-party cookies for advertising, and they wanted to make sure those were more fully baked to be able to really pull the plug and have something to fall back on and not kill half their ads business. Those measures are in place. The Privacy Sandbox APIs are rolling out, matter of fact, like this month into some select Android devices. They're rolling into Chrome. The user interface to be able to manage your ads preferences will be there in January, they say, or February, they say. So we'll have the controls and the mechanisms to replace a lot of this cookie technology with inferior technology, but with something in time for Google to keep its word this time. And third-party cookies are going to go away by mid-2024. So what's the impact of that? Well, it's twofold. One, we have an impact on targeting, and two, we have an impact on analytics or measurement. Let's dig into the ad targeting impact first. As you think about ad targeting, it is a slow, painful death for how we've been targeting ads on the internet so far. Third-party targeting, it really is dead. It is not the night here with its limbs cut off. It really truly is dead. Second-party targeting, which we don't talk about as often, is, I would say, just minorly injured. And this is where the Google Privacy Sandbox solutions will really benefit, targeting media to Google users using Google data, which is what second party is, not targeting advertising to Google users using some third party's data. So when we talk about third-party targeting, we're usually talking about companies like Exalate or Oracle, used to be called Blue Kai, or Lotame. These vendors are the ones that are buying that data from ads being served across the internet and setting those third-party cookies to track people's activity across the internet and turning that around into highly targeted audiences, allowing us as marketers to target them. Their ability to do that dies with the third-party cookie. Can they still sell us something? Yes, but what they're selling us is what's called a probabilistic model. They're taking a combination of signals, including IP address and some browser characteristics, and they're guessing that this person is who they think they are. And based on that guess, they'll say, yes, you should serve an ad to them. So you'll still be able to buy these third-party audiences post mid-2024. They're just not going to work very well because they're going to be based on a bunch of probabilistic measures that at best will get us maybe 50 or 60% of the way to where an actual cookie identifier would get us. However, second-party targeting will live on. And the reason being is because Google is using Google technology to target Google users based on information Google knows. Facebook is using Facebook technology to target Facebook users based on data Facebook knows. Amazon is the same thing. If you're e-commerce, Amazon is targeting Amazon users using information that Amazon knows. And they're generally doing it on properties they either own. In the case of Facebook, you see Facebook ads on Facebook, or they're doing it in contexts that they own, because Google owns all of the ad serving technology, both on the advertiser end as well as on the publisher end. So they have a complete control of that ecosystem and can share data freely between it. This is a lot of where their antitrust stuff is coming from, by the way, in Europe. So if you think about it, Google knows everything you've ever searched for on Google. It knows every YouTube video you've watched. It knows every email you've sent if you're a Gmail user, right? It knows a lot about you. Facebook knows not only everything you've searched for and everything you've tapped on, but they even keep track of the things that you hover on as you're scrolling. Where do you stop in your scroll and pause to go and read or watch something? Amazon knows every product you bought, searched for, looked at, put in your cart and didn't buy, etc. They know a whole lot about your preferences for purchases. All of this is second-party data, meaning we don't have to pay a third party as a marketer. We're going to pay the same company we're going to pay for the ads for the data, and they already have the data in hand. We don't have to worry about sharing it among multiple parties. This is called a walled garden, and there are a couple of considerations to keep in mind as we move forward into 2024 with walled gardens. Expect reach to continue to drop, especially if you're leveraging things like audience expansion inside of LinkedIn or Facebook. Their ability to go and target people off of Facebook or off of LinkedIn is gonna really drastically get cut off at the knees. They're also not going to be able to capture as much signal on your interests and your activities. It used to be that Facebook would have a pretty easy job of following people around the internet outside of Facebook, in addition to people engaging on Facebook, because they had Facebook pixels installed on a wide swath of the internet reporting back. The problem is those Facebook pixels rely on cookies, whether they're first party or third party is sort of irrelevant. They rely on cookies that are not as reliable in 2024. So expect reach to continue to drop, expect precision to continue to drop as well. That's where you're going to see some of the categories are going to get broader. Especially if you go third-party audience, you can get some really, really niche targeting. In 2023, we saw Facebook's categories for their targeting get broader as they weren't able to get the same level of intelligence, and as they wanted to respect their users' privacy a little bit more so they could avoid regulation. You saw their categories get broader. Google's categories have gotten a little bit broader. We're going to continue to see this broadening of categories. The antidote to that is to make sure that you're using algorithmic optimization. So your target is broad, and then they can't give you all the data they have to allow you to target, but they still have all of that data as they go to refine within that targeting who they're optimizing for. So Facebook won't give me a category for some particular niche interest, but they're probably tracking it. When we go and target Facebook ads, if we tell it to optimize for a conversion and it sees that everybody who has that niche attribute that they're not going to expose for us to target, if it sees that everybody has that niche attribute is converting, it'll go after more people with that niche attribute. So categories are going to be broad. The antidote is to make sure we're using algorithmic targeting. When it comes to display, whether you're targeting on DV360 or whether you're targeting on Google Ads, Google is going to have a near monopoly when it comes to precision targeting data. And this kind of sucks, especially because for us as B2B, their B2B targeting isn't nearly as good as a lot of the third parties. But everybody who's operating with third-party cookies and third-party targeting is really going to be capped off at the knees in 2024, and Google will be basically the only show in town. Alternatives, one of the key alternatives we've been guiding a lot of our clients to build a marketing program or an advertising program around and get it optimized pre-2024 is contextual. So contextual will work on Safari and Edge and Mozilla because it doesn't rely on any information about the person looking at that page. All it relies on is information about the contents of that page. So up on the screen right now, you'll see that there is an article here about e-commerce. And guess who's advertising on that article? Well, it's Shopify, because Shopify recognized this content is about e-commerce. And so it was really easy for them to target that content. Contextual targeting is really powerful, but it is also still a little bit limited today. If you want to target niche terms and using contextual targeting, you're going to have a hard time spending money to do so. The providers just don't do a good job of unique keyword-based targeting. Where they really shine is when you need to target a broader category of pages, and they've already cataloged all the pages on the internet on that category. Then you can do a good job of targeting. So it's going to be a little hit or miss on being able to reach audiences using contextual, but it's definitely a way to go to get away from some of that third-party targeting that maybe you're relying on today. So interest-based targeting today, use second-party data, not third-party. If you're relying on third-party audiences, make sure that you've identified if there are second-party audiences you can use instead. You're going to want to make sure that you use algorithms to find the right people within a broader audience, because the targeting categories are only going to get broader moving forward and less accurate. The more you can tell the algorithms how to optimize inside of that target, the better you're going to perform. And then finally, consider incorporating more contextual to get after some of these interests that you're going after today using third-party or even second-party data. Contextual will survive, and I predict that there will be more and more innovation in contextual advertising in the next 2 years as these providers play a little catch up on a targeting tactic that really wasn't as sexy for the last few years as it is today, with a renewed interest in privacy. The other advantage of contextual is it doesn't matter whether that person is completely off the grid privacy-wise and they've got every single privacy blocker loaded into their browser. You're targeting that content, so you can still serve ads in many cases to those individuals, provided the ad blocker isn't blocking the rendering of the ad itself. Okay, so third party's dead, second party is minorly injured. That's where you see that broadening of categories. Let's talk about retargeting. Retargeting is hurt pretty badly. When we retarget users, we put a tracking cookie or a pixel on our website. That tracking code will usually set a first-party cookie these days, as well as phone home about the content that person is visiting and any additional activities or detail that you put into your website to send via that pixel back to that ad provider. The visitor's browser will notify the ad networks for anytime they're visiting a website that is serving ads by that provider, right? Or if they're browsing Facebook, it will recognize that it's that same user. This allows the ad networks to spot that visitor on those other sites, or at least it did. And this is the point where things are now broken, because without third-party cookies, we can't set a cookie on our websites that can be read on slate.com or cnn.com or foxnews.com or whatever your flavor of ad-laden website is. The cookies that are set on our website can't be read there anymore. And that basically kills retargeting as it works today. Can you still use some of those probabilistic markers? Yes. And a lot of providers are moving towards that, relying more on IP addresses and more on browser characteristics to try and guess at that individual on the other side. But it's not as accurate, and retargeting isn't as effective today as it was before 2020, and will be strikingly less effective in Q3 of 2024. There is a loophole, though. The first-party cookie loophole, and that is if I drive traffic to my website from Google Ads, Google will do what's called link decoration to decorate that link with user details. So then that person visits my website, the Google tracking code or pixel on my website will set a first-party cookie that it's allowed to set and can keep, recognizing that that individual is who Google thinks they are. And then because that they know, because it was in that URL. And now Google knows what content that user has seen on your website. So it can, when it's serving content elsewhere, target that individual. This is true of Facebook. This is true of LinkedIn. This is true of whatever ad provider you're working with. If you paid to target them in the first place, that means they can get a hold of that person. If they came to your website through that ad, then that means that that ad provider is able to tag that traffic to your website in a way that it can read, and then retarget that user in the future. This comes to another little bit of education where we need to talk a little bit more about cookies. Remember I said there were two types of cookies, they're first party and third party. There's also two ways to set a cookie. I can set a cookie client side. This means I'm using a script to set a cookie. So in my evil-ads.co example, evil-ads.co ran a script on newyorktimes.com to set a cookie. That is a client side cookie. I can also set a cookie server side. When I log into newyorktimes.com, it's New York Times that's sending me back the web page. When their server sends the web page, it can also send an instruction to set a cookie. You see this anytime you're logging into anything. Marketing automation platforms also use this mechanism to set cookies. Those are server-side cookies. This different way of setting cookies is an important distinction because all of the privacy mechanisms inside the browsers are attacking client-side cookies regardless of whether they're first party or third party. But server-side cookies are relatively safe. This will come up here in advertising. This will also come up later in analytics. Remember I mentioned that your marketing automation platform is setting these cookies server-side, so is WooCommerce, Shopify, whatever your e-commerce is setting these cookies server-side. Those are unique identifiers that they're setting on every single website visitor's computer. Those unique identifiers will stick around long after anything that an ad network is able to set, because the client-side cookies disappear within 24 hours in Safari, Edge, and Firefox. They last longer on Chrome for now. We'll see how long that lasts. But the server-side cookies that are set by Marketo or Mautic or Pardot or HubSpot, or WooCommerce or Shopify or Squarespace or whatever it is you're using there, those cookies can last almost forever. So what you can do is you can send those cookies to your advertising partners in their pixel requests. So what this does is it extends the memory of things like the Facebook pixel. So let's say somebody clicks your Facebook ad and goes to your website. Facebook decorates that link, so it sends enough information so that when the Facebook pixel picks that person up on your website, it knows what their Facebook user ID is. At the same time, that Facebook pixel is also sending back that person's ID in your marketing automation platform. Now, Facebook can associate your identifier from your marketing automation platform with their identifier for their Facebook user. Person goes away, comes back 2 weeks later. At that point, the browser has forgotten anything it remembered about that visitor's Facebook ID, but it remembers their identifier in marketing automation because that's required in order for fundamental things in the internet to work. So Facebook pixel fires again. It's going to send a request back to Facebook, including your identifier from your marketing automation platform. And Facebook goes, oh, I know who that is because I stored that identifier when they were there 2 weeks ago, and now I can go and retrieve their Facebook ID. If you set this up, you can significantly improve your ability to retarget traffic on networks like Facebook that would normally be relying on a client-side cookie. Now you can make them reliant on your already existing server-side cookies. Most advertising partners give you the ability to do this. Google would be the one exception. You can do it in analytics, but doing it on their advertising, it gets to be a little bit trickier. Outside of retargeting, though, you have a couple of options. If you have a large database and you're able to segment that database by interest or other targeting mechanisms, you can use CRM segments to target people that are of interest. That CRM targeting needs to be of a sizable volume. So depending on your ad partner, like Facebook, you need at least 1,000 people in a group. Google, it's more like 2,000. And even then they've got further restrictions unless you're working with an agency. Other providers, you can get that around 200-300, but you need to have a sizable group before you can target them with CRM. But if you are able to put together sizable enough groups of interested parties using CRM lists, usually by taking a look in your marketing automation about who's been engaging with what content, you can use that in lieu of retargeting. You can do the same thing with IPs. So for a number of our clients, we're doing more and more IP targeting, being able to take the IP information out of the marketing automation platform and match that up against either what we know from a segmentation standpoint, which market segment they're in, what persona this person is, et cetera, or from an interest standpoint, where are they in the buyer's journey? What content are they looking at? And we're able to build groups of IP addresses to then go target. Now, this is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you're going to target more people at that physical location than were actually on your website and interested in your product or service. That could be construed as waste. On the other hand, you're probably hitting, in a B2B context, you're hitting other people in the four walls of that business that could be influencing your sale. So you've just expanded your targeting. And I would add, IP targeting of display media is dirt cheap. So it comes out kind of in the wash where you have some waste of targeting people that have nothing to do with your sale and hitting the people that you otherwise wouldn't necessarily be able to hit just through traditional retargeting, because that's retargeting a browser. Now you're retargeting an entire building. Are you going to retarget people's spouses and children? Yes, because sometimes they're going to do that browsing from home, but you're also going to be hitting that person at home, possibly on other devices. So the shift in targeting ends up being a sort of a net neutral in most cases. and can actually be a benefit if you need to hit other stakeholders in a purchase. So retargeting in 2023, a couple key things to remember. One, leverage the loophole that you can do some retargeting if you stay inside the same walled garden. If I target my initial advertising on Facebook, I can retarget on Facebook. If I don't do any initial advertising on Facebook, my retargeting on Facebook is not going to work very well because there's no links to decorate to identify that person as they're coming back to my website. Two, send an additional identifier. Meta, this is easy to do. Other providers, you can do it. You just have to go and dig into the documentation. But this additional identifier extends the memory of the pixels that you have installed on your website to make retargeting continue to work in a post third-party world, or I mean, a post client-side cookie world. And finally, use segmented CRM and IP to replace some of the retargeting that you're doing today. This will help hedge against the continued degradation of retargeting as we move forward into 2024. And you want to start getting this stuff set up today so you can tune it and get it working for you today. If you wait until mid-2024 to try and get all this stuff implemented, you'll be behind the 8 ball because you'll be just like you were when you first started implementing some of these targeting techniques, trying to experiment your way into something that works. And you don't want to be doing that under duress. You want to be doing that now while you can play with small budgets, get stuff working so you have that place to shift your budgets over to in 2024. That's all I've got on advertising. I haven't seen any questions in the chat. Please make sure that you are posting your questions into the chat so that we can make sure that we address those at the end. So if anything I didn't cover advertising wise that you think I should have covered, ask the question now. I will hit it up at the end here. Let's talk about tracking and analytics. So we talked about the two ways that you can set cookies on a computer. You can do it client side using a script. Those cookies don't stick very well. They have a very short lifespan. They aren't easily remembered. And you can do it server side when the server goes to load a web page. And in addition to that web page, it'll send back some cookies to set. Google Analytics uses the script method for setting the cookies. That means that Google Analytics memory got cut really short in 2020 on all of those Safari, Edge, and Mozilla browsers. Now, GA4 sort of has you covered, though. If you remember, part of the announcements around Google Analytics 4 was that they had this artificial intelligence and these mechanisms for being able to track people safely in a post-privacy world. That's mostly true. They're still not going to be as good at it, and they're going to make up information to fill in the gaps in order to make the data make more sense. So inside of your Google Analytics 4 configuration, there's a place called reporting identity. This is where you can see the mechanisms that are being used in order to be able to track visitors on your website and keep Joe and Mary as they come and go from your site. The modeling is where they're talking about the artificial intelligence. You can game this or fix this for yourself a little bit, though. Remember, we talked about passing in a unique user identifier into Facebook. You can do the same thing with Google Analytics. There is a way to pass a user ID parameter, and that can be the identifier from your marketing automation platform. For Brilliant Metrics Mautic clients, we are currently experimenting with this and making sure that it's working correctly before we roll it out to all clients, and expect to see this enhancement here shortly. Another key thing when we talk about, cookie apocalypse here and tracking is tracking conversions. If you remember Facebook, if you advertise on Facebook, you saw that there were notifications about the special things you had to do for iOS on Facebook. That was because of some of the privacy controls that were put in place around cookies. Also, link decoration. Apple really cracked down on that as well. A lot of that Facebook has kind of kind of rolled back. They found some enough workarounds that they don't have to have you jump through as many hoops to be able to target people on iOS. But still, Facebook's memory for somebody having visited your website is still short and imperfect. And your ability to measure conversions for your ads is limited. There's nothing saying after somebody hits that first page that conversion will be captured anymore. What this means is that you really want to leverage Google Analytics as your primary source of truth for measuring conversions, because it's going to be able to do it consistently in the same way across different advertising partners, and it will be able to tell you who converted and who didn't. Now, as we'll find out next month, and I'll tease our next webinar, not everybody visiting your website from these advertising partners is a real person, but your conversions are generally real conversions. One alternative is server-side analytics and server-side tag manager. In a normal setup, you have your website, and then you have Google Tag Manager. Your website calls Google Tag Manager. Google Tag Manager inserts a bunch of scripts back into your website, and the browser goes and sends information off to Facebook and off to Google Analytics. That's all well and good, except for a lot of privacy tools will block Google Tag Manager. They'll block Google Analytics, and they'll block Facebook. So now none of that analytics information is getting to any of those three places. The alternative is to put your Google Tag Manager on your own server, at least on your own domain. And then that means that the privacy blockers don't know it's really Google Tag Manager. And at least as of today, they aren't doing an effective job of blocking it. So that means Google Tag Manager works for you. And then instead of having Google Tag Manager tell the browser to reach out to Facebook, Google Tag Manager reaches out to Facebook. And Google Tag Manager reaches out to Google Analytics. And in doing this, you get around a lot of the issues of third-party cookies, because everything is a first-party cookie. Everything is on your domain, because Google Tag Manager is on your domain, your website's on your domain. So everything that browser is seeing is on your domain. And you're able to store cookies and move information around a lot more easily on your own domain. The downside is this is a lot of work to set up. So analytics in 2023, you're going to want to send a first-party identifier to Google Analytics for, especially sometime between now and the end of the year. Figure out how to get that user ID populated so that GA4 can track really know that this is the same user coming back, and not have to use some modeling or some probabilistic measures to go in and say Joe is Joe and Mary is Mary when they come back. You don't really want to rely on ad platform conversion tracking. It is reliant on client-side cookies. It is reliant on link decoration, both of which are under attack. If you can focus on using Google Analytics as or another analytics platform of your choice as your source of truth for conversion data. And then finally, consider implementing a server-side tag manager. It is not going to be cheap or easy to get set up, but you will be ahead of your peers as far as being able to both retarget and track your visitors' activity consistently, despite a lot of these privacy controls going into play. And with that, I will open the floor to questions. It looks like Mike here has asked a question. If we don't have enough IP addresses, would something like geofencing be a suitable substitute for retargeting? I had mentioned using IPs instead of retargeting pixels. Yes and no. Geofencing would require knowing the physical address of the person visiting your website. Now, is it another tool in our toolbox in a post-cookie world? Absolutely, because CRM targeting doesn't work as well without cookies either. So we are rolling out geofencing across most of our clients right now, again, hedging against CRM targeting not working as well in a post-cookie world. And a lot of our clients rely heavily on CRM targeting. So geofencing is a great substitute there. You just substitute, instead of an email address, a physical address. And you get all of the trade-offs that you get with IP. So you're going to hit the person that you're targeting plus everybody else in that building, which can be a really good thing. And it is also some waste. So you've got to take those two things and assume that they either come out in the wash, or know based on your strategy and your audience whether or not that tactic works for you. Great question. Any other questions? Great. Well, I want to thank everybody for their time today. I really appreciate you coming. I hope you got value out of this presentation. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd be happy to address those. And I look forward to seeing you next month, where we talk about how bots ruin everything. Have a wonderful day.